So we've done it. We'll start with a roll call. Councillor Pillsbury,
Present.
Councillor Daniele,
Here.
Councillor Egan, Councillor Bradley,
Here.
and Chair Pilch is here. Excused tonight are both Councillors Fournier and Councillor Lawrence. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We should all have copies of minutes from meeting 23-22 from December 6th. Does anyone want to make a motion to waive the reading and accept them as printed?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
That's all of us, so 5-0.
Yes.
Next, I have 3 announcements to make.
Want to just make sure you're muted?
I'm not. Here we go.
Okay. So 3 announcements. One is dog licenses. 2023 dog licenses are available. These expire December 31st every year. Dogs 6 months and older are required to be licensed by law. You can register here at Town Hall or online at doglicensing.com. Bring proof of rabies vaccination and spay or neutering. If you don't renew by January 31st, there's a late fee of $25 per dog.
And Fido gets a cookie when the owner comes in and gets a license.
Really?
Yeah, there's a cookie jar with dog treats in there.
Do I get 2 cookies?
My dog reminds me of that.
If I bring 2 dogs, I get 2. I'm looking at Chris. Yeah, all right. Secondly, and maybe a little more importantly, nominations are being accepted for 2022 Citizen of the Year. Each year, the Town Council presents a Citizen of the Year award to honor those who have significantly contributed to the quality of the town. Nomination forms are available here at Town Hall and on the town's website at freeportmaine.com. The deadline is January 5th, so coming up.
Could you remind us how that process works?
Yes, I'll turn it over to John, who's on the Special Projects Committee, right? I think you guys manage that process.
Right.
He's not on,
Are you not on that?
not anymore.
No,
Well, not
so it's the Special Projects Committee
Sides?
makes the recommendation
To the
to council.
Yeah. After a review of nomination procedures, they have a meeting, discussion, and go through it and make the recommendation.
Lastly, Public Works would like to give a reminder to keep turnarounds clear so the plow trucks can turn their vehicles safely. And also please keep the sidewalks clear of vehicles and trash cans. Those are all the announcements I have. Does anybody else have announcements to make?
Is this in the information exchange?
We're about to do that. So seeing no more announcements, let's move to information exchange. So who has information to exchange on the council? Councilor Bradley.
Thank you. 2 things. One, and this is in the downtown vision area of things. The council may remember that we came and asked, that the transportation group came and asked for approval of putting an extended card on the town policy and motor vehicle registration. And since then, I am unhappy to report, although happy to report, that ADA considerations have come up and they're serious and we're taking them seriously, and it'll delay any movement on that until we find out the solution, if any, to those issues. And the other I just want to say is that the sewer committee has met. It's met with itself. It's met with the FEDC. There are conversations going back and forth. It looks to me very positive, and that in a very short period of time, we've gotten focused on things like what does the sewer district need? How could the town help? Should the town help? What are other towns doing? All kinds of things like that that ought to help you in deciding whether or not you want to do stuff like this. Enough.
Thank you. Councilor Egan.
2 quick updates. I am the liaison to Meeting House Arts, and they will be here on January 20th, so we can reserve a spot on the agenda. Oh, is it the 17th? What, the second meeting?
17th.
3 and 14 is 17. January 17th meeting. our second meeting in January, to give us an update on where they are. They just went through a strategic planning process. They have broad ambitions for 2023 and beyond, and would like to catch us up to date since we are a trusted partner of Meeting House Arts. And then also briefly, a little bit of a bump in the road with getting the Housing Committee comprised. One of the members that we were hoping to bring in declined because of a potential perception of conflict. Just about to nail down another candidate for that, and the goal with the rest of this month being a wreck on schedules is to have that group convene first week in January.
Great.
Can I ask you a question, John? Is there any thought as to composition of the committee as it goes forward, or is it going to be static? Are you going to, the committee is the committee, or are you going to entertain other viewpoints? I'm specifically thinking, I remember when we had this session here, and we had members of the public speak as to their experiences through housing issues. Is that going to be something that the committee might, bring on voices like that in the future?
Yeah, I mean, the structure proposed is it's a 12-month ad hoc committee, so there's nothing permanent here. I'm knowing most of the folks that we're going to agree to sit on that and serve would be strongly in favor of hearing those voices. Having that voice on the committee, I don't think there's much of a distinction there, because those there's not a lot of structure in terms of who's on or who isn't, in terms of being able to be heard and have those point of views come forward. There's actually an outline that has been used by a number of other municipalities that are also forming housing committees that I'm going to offer for this group to take a look at in terms of just organizing topics and suggested focus areas. And one of them is getting the input from residents. So I don't know if that answers the question, but
It does, thank you.
that's it.
Okay. Anybody else? I met last night with the Police Advisory Committee, and we got a tour of the police station and the facilities there, and I think the committee is probably going to be sending us a memo detailing what their kind of findings and recommendations are based on that tour. So we'll probably see that in early January, I think, so we have it before budget season in case we want to take any action on that. That's all I've got for information exchange. So unless anybody else says anything, we'll pass it over to the town manager for a report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I've got two items this evening. One, just really briefly, want to thank our Public Works Department. They took part in the Sparkle Parade recently. That was a couple weeks ago now. But the Public Works Department, specifically Kelly and Tammy in the department, both worked to decorate one of our newest plow truck, actually. And they took part, drove it in the parade with several of the members. They've done that now for, I think this might be the third year now, so a great tradition that they started participating in that. So I want to thank them for putting the department out there on the Sparkle Parade. Another department item, I've got members of our fire department here. I've got our chief and our deputy chief of the fire rescue department. And I'm going to turn it over to the chief in a moment. And deputy, I think you've got a little demonstration for us afterwards, right? We've got one of our newest life-saving devices that was purchased with donations. Each year you might get the letters in your mailbox asking for donations to the fire department. Paul's going to give us a little information on what we purchased with some of those donations this past year. I think we've got 3 of them now, is that correct? 3 of these units. But first, Paul's going to talk to us. Paul, do you want to let us know? I know he came to me last week and said that over the past couple weeks they had had a string of 3 cardiac events, including bringing 2 codes back to life, people who were dead, technically dead when the fire department arrived. They had 3 saves on all 3 of these cases. And I said, well, that's great. That must just be another week in your usual business, right? And he said, no, that's usually like 5 a year or 6 a year that they deal with. So over a couple of weeks, 2 weeks maybe, Paul?
2 weeks.
2 weeks, they had 3 events. Paul's going to recognize some of the crew that were involved in those, but 3 fantastic saves, 3 people and visitors to Freeport that are still here with us because of the work that some of our paramedicine crew and one of our police officers specifically did to help them. So Paul, do you want to give us an update on who we're recognizing for those 3 cases?
Yeah, so thank you for the opportunity. As I said, I definitely enjoy bringing positive information and sharing it with you folks on the wonderful crew that we do have employed here, our call people and our career staff. But just to kind of go back, is a couple weeks ago, we had a guest here in town that was doing some shopping in one of the stores here in town, and another shopper kind of come along and said to this person, "You don't look very well. I think we need to call an ambulance for you." And fortunately, the ambulance responded, and that person ended up at Maine Medical Center and immediately went upstairs to the cath lab and basically had, some stents put into their heart to increase blood flow and so forth. 3 days later, the individual is out, home, and I've had 2 phone calls from her, and the paramedic that took care of her has talked to her as well, and lo and behold, they're bringing us lunch tomorrow. So they didn't have to do that, but it's a nice gesture, and it's just something that makes them feel. But the paramedic that run that call was one of our paramedic firefighters, Sarah Bellevue, and she's done an outstanding job with that, and just, great care provider. And crew members of that crew, Gary Lane and Deputy Sylvain and Mike Hansen. Mike Hansen you met, it's one of our career captains, and that's an advanced EMT. So that crew, so that's one of those things that you enjoy, picking the phone up and nobody's complaining about something and just giving us a good praise of, good job. So ironically, this device that we have here tonight is purchased through the, donation funds that we put the letter out, and it has been able to take, and we placed it in service this last Friday on our trucks, one in each of the trucks. That donations that come in is that we've spent $60,000 on 3 of these pieces of equipment, so in totality. So it is a significant life-saving piece of equipment for us. It's moving into the standard. I got a short video we'll show you. There's some good information there. Scott will take and set the machine up, how quickly we can set that up and put that in place on running a cardiac arrest on scene and transport. One of the things that it does do for us, it frees up some crew. If you had to take and do 100 compressions in 2 minutes and continually do that for a 20-minute trip, you're expended at the time you get to the hospital, and your quality of compressions dwindles over time because you just can't keep up that pace. This machine, basically, we got a spare battery, we got the ability to plug it into the outlet, so it will run continuous for us on that. But it also makes being in the back of the ambulance and traveling to the hospital a safe place for our crew, because you're unbelted, in positions, doing CPR, managing, setting up, and that thing just works away, and you can actually be safer and not bouncing around in the back. And so it's basically life-saving for somebody that's had a cardiac event, and it's potential life-saving for us as far as not getting thrown around or tossed around the back of the ambulance with that. That being said, this past week, we had a call for chest pain, and the paramedics responded to the location and talking with the patient and providing some some support to the spouse, and the individual collapsed right in front of the paramedic. And so CPR started. We actually called Yarmouth to have them bring their mechanical CPR device over, and through the work of the crew and everything, and transport to the hospital. Is our report from the hospital is that he will be either walking out of the hospital today or tomorrow. Have some, health issues to manage, but the fact is that he'll be around to spend time with the individuals, with their family. This holiday season is a plus. And the crew that participated in that primarily was, see my notes. So basically, one of our new paramedics, Naomi Cummings, and also Steve Roy, one of our longtime career medics, We're the primary providers there. And also, too, is that one of our call officers was on scene and ended up driving for him to the hospital. And the support, obviously, a few of our chiefs were there, and another crew is Jason Cass and Gary Lane, Oscar Corral, and one of our brand-new EMT hires, Leah McMasters, all were on scene, participated in that call. So getting them out of the house, but also, too, is that providing, family support. So, it's another important part of our job there. That being said, we're in training Wednesday night, putting everybody through the in-service so that they're qualified on setting this device up. And we had a call for a person not breathing, unresponsive, and at a place here in town. And so, again, we had a station full of people, and we were able to take a crew out really quick turnout, and responded to the scene. And kudos and to the Freeport PD. They're great partners with us, because the first person through the door was Officer Norris of the PD, and began CPR and prior to our arrival, and participated with them until we got them out of the house and into the ambulance. So much support and stuff, and we work well with the PD. We train with the PD. We teach them our methods so that they're an integral part of the team on these type of calls. So we've got a few officers over and learned the aspect of that, and we got some more to get covered. So, but the outcome of that call is crew transported to Maymed, and we learned that that individual will be discharged as well here. Which one of them had the cabbage, Scott? The first one?
The second one.
Second one. So the second one.
First one's going to get a cabbage. Second one had one, and it's had a complication with it.
So some significant health issues, but the fact is they're all here, alive, without losing, any sort of neurological effect and so forth. So that crew, as the primary crew, was Hannah Busey, Peter Holmquist, Matt Condy, and again, Captain Hansen with that. And we had some, and the crew that took care of the spouse was is Sarah Bellevue and Eric Knudsen. So, so really the team approach, I can't tell you I'd be more proud than this crew. It's just the diligence in the senses, doing their job and making things work and helping one another. So I think, it kind of goes to say is that, we had a good week. A lot of times these efforts go in and we do the best that we can. Sometimes their health conditions, predisposed to things, just don't make it as a positive outcome. So we relish the fact that we've got a positive outcome, and the 3 people are going to have, holiday with their family. So, but I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you, share these stories, and we'll show you the quick video and then a quick demonstration and answer any questions you might have. The letter should be going out soon and replenish that, but we've also were able to purchase earlier this year what they call a video laryngoscope, and it's newer technology. So if we've got to breathe for you and we got to put an ET tube in, this piece of device has got a little video scope on it, and we're able to take and actually see the chords a lot better and a much better outcome that way. So, these things aren't cheap, but through the efforts of our citizens on these campaigns, help us, in many ways, and it's, they're as much part of our success as our crew. So, this video is a commercial from Stryker. And just kind of show this thing and a couple things about it, just so kind of school you on the device.
Did you know that you can minimize hands-off chest time during Lucas Chest Compression System application to just 10 seconds or less? With quick and proper application, the Lucas device has been proven to increase blood flow to the brain by 60% compared to manual CPR. Let's get started. Begin high-quality manual compressions immediately after arriving on scene. As your partner is performing compressions, use ABC 1, 2, 3 to prepare the device for use. A stands for activate. Open the carrying case and push the green on-off button. The device is now activated and ready for application. B stands for backplate. Remove the backplate from the top of the case. Notice the suggested placement marker diagram for reference. Coordinate a natural pause in compressions with your partner and place the backplate under the patient. This will be your first hands-off moment. If coordinated well, this should only create a few seconds off the chest. Once the backplate is under the patient, your partner can immediately resume manual compressions. C stands for compressor. Lift the upper part from the case with the control panel facing toward you. Cradling the device like this allows for optimal placement control. Quickly pull and release the yellow rings to ensure the claws on both sides are open and ready to meet the backplate. As your partner continues compressions, attach the support leg nearest you to the backplate. Coordinate with your partner and swing the device quickly over the patient and listen for a click as you attach the other support leg to the opposite side. Pull up once to confirm the parts are attached on both sides. Your partner can continue manual compressions during the application. The controls on the Lucas device are labeled 1, 2, 3. First is adjust mode and indicates lowering the suction cup to the chest. When placing the suction cup, the compression point should be at the same spot as for manual CPR. Second is the pause or lock indicator. When you press this key, the height position of the suction cup is fine-tuned and locked into the start position to ensure proper compression depth. This is the second hands-off moment. If coordinated well, this should only create a few seconds off the chest. The third indicator, active, starts compressions. You have two options from this mode: 30 and 2, or continuous compressions. The three control steps allow for only a few seconds off the chest. Remember to prioritize proper placement. And that's it. I hope this tip helps make your job easier so you can focus on saving lives.
Short and sweet, but that's the gist of it. So we'll get to see it in live person here as far as how easy this thing is deployable.
Definitely need it now.
So one of the tricks with this is your crew working, they've already started CPR. The CPR is in progress. We need to do 2 rounds of compressions of 30 and 2. And as they start to set this up, as Scott's doing, and just, it's designed in, in a minute and a half, can be pretty much up and running with this device. And you just continuous, basically start and go. And, we've heard stories as far as carrying people down the stairs with somebody on a backboard strap and this thing in place, whereas traditionally we have to move people out of the second floor, so we got to stop CPR. So the studies have really shown is that what you don't want to happen is to lose the compression, because you're circulating the blood through the body. Whereas you got to stop, then you got to take and regain. And the studies have shown is that when you stop, that ability of the blood to flow decreases immensely. So these devices are, almost $20,000 a piece. But I mean, putting a price tag on life so we're doing as much as we can to advance our quality of care here in the town and take care of our citizens. Shut it off, Scott, so I can hear.
It's very powerful. Does it break ribs and bones and things?
It could possibly break some ribs. I mean, even manual CPR, getting on somebody's chest, and again, it comes back to, age and whether or not, degenerative bone disease. I mean, all those sort of things do play in it. But the aspect of it is, they will heal. Your breastbone will heal. So.
How long can that do that for, Paul?
So each battery runs about 45 minutes, Peter. We have 2 in each unit plus an AC power cord. We can either run it off the wall power or for an extended time in the residence. There are times, depending on what rhythm the patient's in, that we will spend time on scene for a considerable amount of time, up to 60 minutes, attempting to resuscitate a patient in certain conditions. So we have plenty to power that. The other thing is Chief mentioned, even if we have a scenario like the two we had in the last 2 weeks where we got a pulse back on scene, that patient's at extreme risk of having another cardiac arrest in the immediate aftermath of regaining a pulse the first time. So the goal is to apply that to them before we transport. And then if they go back into arrest, as Paul said, we can be in a seated position, belted, restart the machine, continue compressions, continue our care, and they're getting perfect compressions. In fact, in some parts of the country, not right here as far as I know this week, in Portland area, but in some parts of the country, the cardiologist will take them to the cath lab with this device functioning and keep them on a ventilator and try to stent that artery open. That requires some behind-the-scenes magic because it needs a different piece to go to the cath lab, but certainly we've already discussed operationally, if Med wants to keep going and wants the machine left there, we'll leave the machine with them and leave an operator, to give that patient the best chance they have.
Until they need to stop doing CPR.
Until they need to start doing CPR.
Do other departments nearby have similar equipment?
Yeah, Yarmouth has one. Portland is implementing a program. They've been in place about 4 years across the state.
There's about, I want to think, 27 or 42 of these things already deployed on ambulance services across the state. The challenge for a lot of more rural services would benefit from this, but it's also their funding mechanism and so forth. For some of the rural volunteer services across the state, that's a lot of bake sales.
Yeah.
So we're fortunate, this community is very fortunate in their generosity with us, and, this is just a demonstration of putting it back into, the programs for the community.
So again, this isn't something that our people couldn't do, but they can't do it perfectly for 45 minutes straight on the way to the hospital.
Right.
It's,
By all means, a couple minutes and you're tapping out, right, and someone else is taking over and you're
Yeah,
rotating. So.
we teach the crews that they should put a fresh person on compressions every 2 minutes when we stop to analyze the rhythm and potentially defibrillate them.
We have one for each ambulance?
Yes. And I'm lucky, when we placed the order, they basically told us they were going to be 14, 15 weeks out, and I'm like, well, that's the springtime, and it's like, it'd be nice to have these sooner. And then about 2 weeks later, the UPS guy showed up with 3 big boxes, and it's like, yes. So, Christmas.
hope you don't have to use them, but I'm sure we will at some point. So.
Yeah. So this is just, more demonstration of the technology that's going into our world. Lastly, I just want to drop back and say is that the first scenario I told you about with the paramedic and the person going to the cath lab, that's also was a change in our practice, is that our paramedics have been trained in acquiring and interpreting 12-lead EKGs and basically making, with the history that they gained, making the call to the hospital and actually setting the stage so that you're going up to the cath lab a lot quicker than just landing in the ED, so forth. So the pre-hospital care is advanced to make things a lot quicker in the hospital. So we might stop at the ED long enough for them to maybe acquire another 12-lead EKG and identify the patient, give them their wristband, and wait for them to, clear a room upstairs. And the goal is, there's a lot of study-ins, is from the time of onset to the time they're underneath the doctor's care is like 90 minutes.
It's 90 minutes to balloon inflation. So.
Yeah. So, having our medics trained in that is paramount on that survivability. So again, thank you for the opportunity to come tonight, share our stories, and share it with the public that might be watching. And again, I appreciate the donations that do come in. So
hopefully we won't need to see you for another couple months because you won't have any good stories to share.
Yeah. Well, Chief, Deputy, thanks for coming in and the demonstration as well, but more importantly, thank you for being there. I mean, on behalf of all of us, but on behalf of the thousands of people that know you're just a phone call away. I know that a lot of towns are losing that privilege and people are taking it for granted, but we don't. So thank you. Please pass on our thanks to the folks who were involved in those calls.
Yeah, nice job to those crews.
Are there any weight or size?
yes. there is a bit as far as is the throat of the compression is that, you know, a young child, let's say 12 or under, you can't use it. Somebody very thin, frail, that, you know, the compression will only go down so far. You can't pad underneath them and so forth. So size-wise there, but also too is that the size of the chest, and I want to say, you know, 350, 375, you know, we're kind of getting into that window where we might not be able to fit them in. They taught us some tricks on what we can do, body position to try it, and, you know, we might be able to squeeze them in, but there is a limit on the size. So other than that, that's pretty much the limitation. So,
Thanks, Chief.
okay.
Yeah,
Deputy.
Thank you. Thank you.
Official name of that is
Lucas 3, chest compression system.
Thanks, Tom, for the video support. You're welcome.
It'll be a short meeting.
All back to you. Thank you.
Are you all done?
I am.
Okay.
I've got another presentation from the police department. They're coming in 3 minutes if you'd like to wait.
Any questions for the manager?
Got it. Thank you. We've got some, in Councilor Bradley, we have 7 people watching on Zoom, let alone
Wow.
online and on cable, so. Might have 15 people watching now.
Practically a full house for Zoom standards, which is a good segue into our public comment period. So this is the time when the public is invited to come up and talk about anything that's not already on our agenda. So it looks like we've got some folks in the room. We've got some folks maybe on Zoom. For the folks on Zoom, if you do want to speak during public comment, please raise your virtual hand and we'll call on you, bring you over. But in the meantime, anybody in the room wants to come up, tell us who you are, where you live, what you want to speak about, and try and keep your comments relatively short. We've got a lot to cover, but I also want to give you time to speak about what's on your mind. So who wants to go first?
Someone's got to get up.
Hello, good evening. I'm Bob Stevens from Moose Crossing in Freeport. Mason and I got a letter to you somewhat belatedly describing how we think the ARPA allocation money could be used to help people in town that need help with heating and other purposes, and also to help electrify Freeport. I'm not sure where to begin, whether to try to answer questions. I don't know whether there's response. I can't remember whether there's any response from the council about what you're planning on doing that. I just want to go back a little bit into the year. I guess myself, for a number of years, I really didn't understand what was going on with the climate. And only in the last few years, as I've gotten older, I realized we're in trouble. And I think the council understands that too. And I think that the council, I believe, is committed to try to help Freeport do what it can do locally. It's almost like little lights we need across the United States. If we do something here, maybe our neighbor next to it will catch fire too. And that's why a number of people, as you know, 700, 800 people, have asked the council to lead in these respects, and have suggested 2 ways to do it. One was to move a little bit ahead of the state, which is sort of malingering regarding adoption of the stretch building code. And the second is to use unallocated ARPA funds. And it's really hard because this is something that we sort of think is all out there in the future someplace, and it'll take care of itself. We got other things to do. We got other big things in town to do. You know, we got the streets to worry about. We got the downtown to worry about. But I think what we got to do, if we want to be a leader rather than a member of the pack, and I hope that's how you all feel about it, is move some of these things along. Because these other things, important as they are, don't count if we can't make this world last. So I hope you're going to turn and use some of these unallocated ARPA funds, make them available, see if people take advantage of them. You know, IRA funds will come along too, But as Efficiency Maine says, there's really no time to waste. Why waste the opportunity to have what you have right now? And secondly, why kick off into next year the stretch code? I thought the idea was to try to stay ahead of the state, try to get that adopted this year and give people some information on it next year. Not to send it to another committee that is or is not being formed or is not going to take action. We don't need any more study on those things. So I ask you to do what you've asked us to do, is come to you and say, these are the things that are important. And we support you. We want you to ask us whatever else you might want us to do, but we need action. That's about it. And I wonder, are we going to get it? Any response?
I'll offer a thanks for your passionate speech, and I sympathize with what you're trying to do. I don't have a date that says this is the date we're going to take action, but I know that the spirit of us up here is generally to try and move the needle on stuff, to try and lead. I know on the stretch codes, we talked about what our next steps were, and I think those are, we've taken action on those. We've got a committee formed. We've got some discussion going on what the impact is. We've got some discussion going on, do we want to offer incentives? Do we want to apply the stretch codes to everybody or just some of the buildings in town? So there are nuances that we're looking into. I encourage the discussion to continue. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people asking for uses on the unallocated ARPA funds, and we need to make a decision on that. So.
I appreciate that, Mr. Chair. With respect to the stretch code, the town officer, code enforcement officer is quite aware. It's going to be applicable to everybody. It's not going to be applicable to this group or that group. So why look into making it applicable to this group and not that group? I think that's a waste of time. And I think we're missing an opportunity to move the needle along and be leaders. As far as other uses of funds, yeah, those are great, but there's nothing before you. We got a priority of the planet and doing what we can do locally. I don't think they're comparable. I think others have important, but I think it's a priority that needs to be established here. Thank you very much.
Yeah. So the good news is that this town's got a million things in the frying pan, and a very small number of people in charge of making the decisions. So the bad news is things that are critical get lumped in with everything else, and there's no process to decide that something deserves a priority outside unless somebody does what Bob did tonight. And I agree with him. I mean, as one counselor, I'm up here like everybody else looking for ARPA funds for my pet project, but I'd give it all up, all of it, to give the climate its due, so we could set an example and actually do something as opposed to think about it and plan for it. Not that I believe anything, and with all due respect, is the silver bullet or the gold bullet that solves it all, but it shows the people in town that we think this matters most, if we do. And it also shows by example that they can get things done in the climate. And if we don't, then I worry, as Bob does, that we have nothing else that matters. So I hope we find money. I hope we do the stretch code. Unless there's some critical reason that we have to delay it, let's just do it and then let people come back to us and say, well, that we really didn't consider this, and then we can adjust it, as we often do when we do an ordinance. Let's give them some ARPA money. I don't know what the right amount of money is, but we should give some money to the climate. That's my view, and I know that we're going to have a vote on giving FCS some new Mainer money, and we've already done that, and that's right. So it's done, and I'm going to come and ask for money for sewer or something else. So everybody's going to ask, but all of those things are, in my view, in a line of issues that we're addressing to help the town generically. This is existential in my view. I hope we can do something, and I know others feel as strongly as I do. That's not the point. The point is that I think we're being so careful that we're losing the chance to make a difference.
I agree with Ed's sentiment. But I thought at the last meeting we had decided, or I thought one of the proposals that had support was to do a pilot program. Because one of the concerns that I would have is that, well, two things. One, sustainability of the program. And I know Jake had mentioned potentially doing some sort of loan program or pool to support folks that wouldn't have the upfront money to go ahead and do like heat pumps. But the other issue is, how are we going to run a program? And I think that starting with some seed money and doing a pilot will demonstrate to us how we best run that, how we coordinate with Efficiency Maine or whatever group we decide to coordinate with, because I think we want to leverage our money as sort of in the line of Efficiency Maine or other grants, and then our money is sort of last because there's a finite pool of it. But I don't have a clear idea of how we're running that program or the best way to do it. So I'd rather start with some seed money, get something going, learn some lessons without saying, here's a lot of money and put it at risk that we're not going to distribute it wisely. So, but I mean, I thought that was the sentiment that we discussed last time. So how do we go from having this discussion to putting something in place?
Does anybody want to take point on coming back with a proposal? It could be what Bob's offering, it could be something different, it could be some more questions.
Money is available. If
500, 400 something thousand?
It's not currently committed.
Close to $500,000.
400 and something thousand.
Can I have that memo that I
It
just?
was 510 recently, but I don't know what it is.
And you would like to see us give it all to this?
No.
He asked for 150.
We listened to what you said and others said, Matt, at the last meeting.
Could you go up to the podium, Bob?
Right, the original proposal was.
I'm back there at the podium.
$427,600.
How much?
$427,600.
Okay. Originally, we thought 150, but then we see that there may be IRA money coming along that some people have decided to wait for, and we've come back and said, look, we think you ought to put $75,000 there, a meaningful amount. If you go much lower than that, nobody's going to put,
We gave you $75,000.
pardon me.
Who would be accepting the requests for the use of that money? The town or you? Or
The town would, and I've spoken with the town manager about the ability of staff to handle this. And if I misquote you, sir, please correct me, but you think that the way we've suggested it be run would not make too much a burden on the staff. I also know that there will be volunteers who would be happy to contribute some time. There may be an extra office back there someplace, even if place is needed. So the long answer is, I think the short answer is the town could do it. And we'll help.
All right, so I don't know if this is right or wrong. I move that we appropriate $75,000 from ARPA as seed money to start the program going with the help and support of the town manager and staff, and start learning the lessons that we'll need to learn about how to make this a sustainable program in the future.
I would prefer to not go so fast. I think what would be a great next step would be maybe our next meeting, we have under other business, a bigger conversation about what we want to do with the ARPA money, with the intent of, let's start putting things into a bucket, let's see, and then making a decision about how much we choose to spend on this program if we all agree at that point, and then go forward and make that motion then. I agree that this is a worthy thing, but again, I want to kind of get my head around, well, what are those other asks? Let's really just lay it out. Let's spend an hour and say, okay, here are the buckets that we think of right now. This is our kind of our game plan. Let's move forward with this much.
I'm going to second Ed's motion.
Okay.
Jake, I just know enough about how the downtown's going that those requests are going to come in over time. In other words, it will be 6 months waiting to figure out what all the legitimate asks are for ARPA. And we have examples already where people have come up early because that they were ready or stuff, and we've given them ARPA money. Some of it was so clear we didn't have to talk about it. But look at FCS, it not only got good money, but it got contingent money. I know we're gonna talk about that not being contingent anymore, but we were willing to do that for things we thought were of critical importance. I can't think of anything in all of the downtown that's more critical than the climate. I just can't. Although there are a lot of really important projects. So that's my response, but I get it. I mean, and this is the problem I think we're having. We want to be wise, rational, considerate, comprehensive, and all of those things defeat this particular purpose. That's my take.
Yeah. Councilor Pillsbury?
Well, two questions. So, I mean, we had also talked the last time about potentially using some of the money with Freeport Housing Trust to allow them to do these projects in their managed buildings, to then have an effective lowering rents for folks that live in those.
Is your mic on?
Yeah.
Okay.
Lights on.
Right. It's okay.
So I would like to see that as part of the proposal. And I'm just wondering, like, where the balance is there, because I see great value of doing that, because this is a partnership that the town already has in Freeport Housing Trust. It's a value to our community, and it probably speaks to a wider group of folks than the ones that might be able to come in during the pilot program and get a set amount of funding. So I'd be in favor of supporting something that would have a distribution there as well.
Councilor Egan?
I got an email, I guess maybe it didn't go to all of the counselors, that Bob and his group have already approached Freeport Housing Trust and gotten a very positive reception on exactly that, and a commitment that if they can take advantage of the Electrify Everything effort and match it with other rebates, that they, in fact, would use it to reduce rents. So that exact dynamic that you were just articulating. I don't think that enough data has been drilled onto yet to determine how many units or how many households might actually benefit from that. Therefore, how much of the initial allocation might go towards that population of landlord units at Freeport Housing Trust. But they've already had that conversation.
Yeah. And I'm just asking, if we are willing to give up to 75,000, where do we draw that line?
Right.
Can I provide some further information that's relevant to what Matt and John are talking about, which is the description of the program that accompanied the letter that Mason and I sent last night, in fact, does exactly that. It establishes the fact, so thinking like a lawyer, that rentals, or people who rent units from Freeport Housing Trust, if Freeport Housing Trust participates in the program, which it could, the way that we're suggesting it be set up, those occupants constitute a household for the limitation of the money that would be, much like South Portland, Bangor does, $2,000 for a household. So if there were 20 households, 20 rentals, there could conceivably be, $40,000 right there to Freeport Housing Trust. The other thing I'd like to mention regarding Freeport Housing Trust, and this is a bit premature, is that one of the committees of Freeport Climate Action Now, the Solar and Buildings Energy Group, led by John O'Brien, a young guy who has a lot of energy, has met with Matt Peters about the idea, which we had talked about and have written a letter to the council about, of using the capped landfill at the recycling center for a community solar project. And the Housing Trust is quite interested in participating in something like that. And in fact, the board has authorized a sum of money because they feel like they need like another 160 kilowatts of electricity. So we're working with the trust. I think there are more than one ways to help the trust. This, what we're asking for tonight, is one way, and we'd like to get started on it and see if it works. If the money isn't used as soon as the council wants it used, pull it back, move it on to something else, but let's try it. And as to what we use it for, Counselor, these are items that have sort of been vetted by other towns. We've added a few of our own because we're concerned about noise and trying to replace some gasoline appliances with electric, and we think those will help us. So let's give it a try. 75,000 would be a great start.
So here are some of my thoughts on it. I love the spirit. I want to do something. I'm not ready to do something tonight because of a few reasons. One is there's a lot of money coming out of the Inflation Reduction Act. They're still writing the rules, but a lot of it is directed towards exactly this kind of help. I don't know how much of that is directed towards Freeport. I don't know how much of that's directed to each individual resident, to low income, to medium income. There are a lot of questions. I don't know that the answers are published yet, but it seems like there's another much larger pot of money that's directed specifically at this problem. So I'd like to get some more information about that before we start depleting our ARPA funds for this. If we're starting with a seed program, I think we could start with something much lower than $75,000 just to get it off the ground, to see how much interest there is, to see how fast this would go, and we can always replenish that if it's something that there's a lot of demand for. I'm hesitant to set the precedent that whoever gets here first can get ARPA money. We said we would have roughly a third for FCS and social services, roughly a third to work on our downtown, roughly a third to work in infrastructure. Now there's a fourth category, but because the proposal is a little bit more finessed and they're here first, we're ready to spend the money on that without saying, well, let's see what's in these other buckets, which might take a few months to do, but we should at least consider what might come out of there. We've got some indications of what's likely to come from some of those, and we'll have a lot more in the next month. I'm also hesitant I don't want to say rush into things, because I know we've been talking about this for many weeks, even a few months, but to do something kind of without announcing it, just to bring it up as a motion and spend $75,000 without the opportunity for the public to come in and voice their support or otherwise. We certainly can do it. We have the power to do it. I don't like doing that. I like putting things on an agenda saying, next Tuesday we're going to be talking about distributing $75,000 from ARPA for this particular program. Please come and tell us what you think or email us. So there are a few reservations I have. I don't dislike the program. I just have questions, and I'd like to give it more consideration before I say yes, or before we determine what the right amount is. Councilor Daniele?
Yeah, Councilor Pilch, I'm very much leaning the same way. I also think we have 2 councilors missing, which would be nice to include everybody in the discussion of ARPA funds. And I did talk to the Sustainability Advisory Board about that $40,000 that they had for the sustainability position. And they're still going through the process of, okay, well, if it's not going to go to that, what else could it go for? They were going to discuss it at their next meeting, which would be in January. And so I think that's like another pool of money that if they don't use it, will go back into general funds. So that's sustainability money right now, and some creative things we could do with it. And they would like to keep it for other things at a later point, but we'd have to remember that it's in this year's money, and then they'd have to ask for it again. Anyway, the point is that I think having a quick discussion next meeting would be very helpful, and invite the public to come and talk about it. So that's where I would come down.
Yep. Councilor Bradley?
I mean, this is the way we do things, and I have no criticism of it. I mean, how could you criticize rational thinking and planning and progress? That's what's on the table. That's what we've been doing for most things. I'll say 2 things. One, this is downtown. I mean, electrification and climate is part of the goals of the downtown revision plan. So let's just make sure that we recognize that it reaches into all parts of our lives. And the second thing is, you could start with the $75,000 and give them the assurance that they can set up a program, but that if you found, as you went away and did your other work for your other sources, whether it be a grant or it be the infrastructure bill or whatever it is, that there were funds that could be applied there and save your ARPA funds for other things, and you could always do an exchange. You're not limited once you've done it. Or you could do it in section 25, 25, 25 to time it, to give you the time. There's all kinds of ways to creatively handle those concerns, which are good concerns. I'm not being negative about that. But I think it is time to do something. This would be about the third time, whether it's stretch code or electric appliances, or now the housing trust is tied in. That's a great idea. That we've had this conversation and done nothing because there's more to do. At some point, there'll be nothing to do, my view. So I'd like to see us do something, and I don't mind waiting one meeting. To Jake's point, to bring more counselors into the conversation and give the public a chance to weigh in. Your public as well. I mean, you two come up here every day. I mean, we all know who you are, but you have 417 or 813 petitions, and there's a lot of chairs in this room. Love to see them, and so we're inviting the public to come and let us hear them. But let's do it soon. Next meeting, could we?
I'm fine putting it on the agenda for next meeting. You've got a motion on the floor for tonight.
I'll withdraw the motion if that helps. I'm just trying to get it going because I could see us thinking our way through the spring and through the budget season on this.
I'm happy to make room for it on the agenda on January 3rd.
Is that all right? Does that make sense?
Yes, may I respond to this for a moment, Mr. Chair? This is, I think, fantastic, because I see concern up there, and what I'd like to see, it's cold outside, it's going to get colder. Oil prices, somebody got a bill today, it was double for electricity bill. The oil bills are horrible. What Efficiency Maine is saying about this, sure, IRA's coming along, and they'll have their programs, and it'll take them a while to get them established, but we don't know the final eligibility criteria. There may be additional incentives. We know that delaying will guarantee missed energy savings. So next meeting would be fantastic as something that hopefully you would feel action could be taken at if you hear enough and agree that we need to move. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So,
I withdraw the motion.
okay. John, are you okay with that since you seconded it? You're okay with that? Okay. So, I'll make room for it on the January 3rd agenda. If anybody wants to talk to Bob before then to kind of craft or massage the proposal, it'll be a good time to do it. We've got holidays between now and then, but
We'd love to help.
yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure.
You should lead. I mean, you know what the hell you're doing, and we're all sitting here saying, yes, 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 but oops.
Well,
But, we need the expertise, and even if it's just drawing in what the other communities have for criteria and everything. But let's put a fine point to the proposal for the 75 and say, okay, this is how we're going to start. We'll learn as we do this. There'll be more, it's
Can I
a
spend a little
pop.
time with the town manager on it?
We have it, yeah.
yeah.
All right.
If we can find the time between now and then.
Well, that's.
That's going to be the tricky part. But
I'm going on a 2-week
We're the
vacation
town
starting
council.
tomorrow.
yeah.
I was about to ask Bob, when has that stopped you from coming and spending time on it with me
It
anyways?
never has,
Yeah.
but I'd like to hear the council say, please do this, Mr. Manager.
Yeah, can I just make a pitch, though, that we come back with a number that Freeport Housing Trust might be able to use? Because the reason that's so important to me is that that's guaranteed affordable housing in perpetuity, essentially, whereas someone that's a private resident gets the grant, and if they sell their property and someone comes in and doesn't have the income restrictions, they get the benefit. And I think the heart of this is to do two things. One, to get us to a more sustainable heating source for the environment, but also to support lower income folks with their heating bills. And so I'd really like to see a piece of that that's concrete.
Well, that's why we reached out to the Housing Trust, and we could try to nail it down. Okay?
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens. Is there anybody else from the public who wants to come up and talk about this or any other topic?
I'll go last.
Okay.
I'm down with it. I'm
Okay. You never know.
You're on mute.
I think so, I don't know.
You are.
Okay.
You're in the right place.
Hedgehog Mountain?
I guess. I don't
Okay.
know.
Yeah, I'll give you the scoop on Hedgehog.
Okay. I've been here before.
Wearing a different outfit, though.
Wearing a different outfit, right. So thanks for letting me speak during the public comment period. I have 3 items to bring forward. One is it's interesting that the fire rescue folks were here because I wanted to acknowledge the police, fire rescue, and public works departments or personnel for their good work throughout the year. At this time of the year, I especially thank them for their sacrifices of time away from family and friends as they work to keep us safe. The real feel of a small town community shows when these folks are doing what they do best, taking care of the community of Freeport. So the second thing I want to talk about are plans. We were talking about plans for the program that was just brought up by Mr. Stevens. I am a plan person through and through. I make plans even now in my retirement so that things get done and I know what the ultimate goal is. I'm also cautious about continuing to push for the use of a plan when it doesn't work to accomplish the desired goal. That the town council, from what I see, has embraced the recent development of Freeport's downtown vision plan, a plan that contains many ideas and suggestions to revitalize the downtown area, some of which were experimented with during this past summer. I'm waving the caution flag against making too many changes, too many significant changes, to existing guidelines that protect the quaint, historic look of Freeport. Freeport's New England Village Center would lose its distinct character, one that residents and visitors enjoy, if the permitting process for development was streamlined and changes made to such things as density, building height, and architectural standards. Think of Falmouth and the new multi-story buildings built close to Route 1. The distinctive character of that area of Falmouth have been marred by these structures that are not visually compatible with the surrounding area. Back to Freeport, several goals and projects identified in the Downtown Vision Plan as priorities for the town conflict with the visual effect desired for Freeport's historic district of town, such as the Main Street redesign and placement of multifamily housing. Please use the vision plan as a guide, not a hard and fast rule, and proceed with great care in determining changes to town ordinances that impact our lovely New England village. Third topic, gateways into the community from the north and the south. On the north end of town, the northern gateway, if you want, at Main and Mallet Drive, sits McDonald's restaurant. We are very fortunate in Freeport to have a fast food restaurant that has design features that complement adjacent historic buildings. 40 years ago, the town of Freeport required McDonald's to modify its typical box-like appearance to fit within the existing character of buildings on Main Street. The approval process came with much angst. In those 40 years since McDonald's opened, Freeport has been praised and recognized for its determination to maintain the town's distinctive look. That McDonald's has been recognized as one of the most unique restaurants in the U.S., and people come to Freeport to have their picture taken in front of that building. As you walk on Main Street, there are many examples of how, over the years, town leaders have maintained the architectural character of Freeport as the small village it is. On the south end of town, the southern gateway at Main and West Street, there is an opportunity. There is an opportunity to shape that entrance for the town, much like the northern gateway. Currently, there is a proposal in front of the Design Review Board for 2 multi-story apartment buildings on that vacant lot at the intersection. I wrote to you before about the visual affront those buildings would have to anyone entering Freeport, traveling north over the railroad overpass. My concern has not waned. The proposed buildings are square and modern. There is nothing about them that fit within the neighborhood scale, height, proportion, rhythm, or roof shape. I understand that certain parameters need to be met to make a building on this lot feasible. However, it is not the town's responsibility. It is not our responsibility to fulfill the developer's wish to have certain profitability. It is our responsibility to have this building conform to the aesthetics established on Main Street. There are few people with more influence in a small New England town than those who serve as a town manager and town councilors. And I thank you for your service. I truly do. The people of Freeport count on you as our leaders to make decisions that will improve the quality of our life here. Small decisions and large town-changing decisions. The property at the intersection of Main and West Street, the use for that plot of land has emerged as an important town-changing decision. I've been told that the decision about the use of that land at 22 Main Street is not up for consideration by you, by the council. It is not something that has come before you for review. The town council has, however, had much influence about this plot of land in meetings with board and committee members or at social gatherings. I am asking that your influence be directed toward a use for this property that is compatible with the character of Freeport's downtown, in scale and visual effect. I am asking that you use your influence to create a warm and welcoming gateway into Freeport from the south, not a harsh, unattractive box blocking the view to this very building and our historic village. There seems to be a rush to get multifamily housing projects approved in the downtown district. Perhaps this urgency is driven by a desire to fulfill components of the downtown vision plan. I would agree that the infrastructure in the downtown area supports that type of housing. I would not agree that the proposed housing needs to be situated on Main Street. I would not agree that this particular proposed building fits any of the required design components that form our downtown village. The townspeople will look to you, I will look to you as a council for whatever change happens at 22 Main Street. Very few people pay close attention to the day-to-day happenings in town government, as you pointed out with how many people were watching on Zoom or that are here in the room. They do pay attention when something impacts their town in a big way, especially in a big visual way. And this group of proposed buildings is a big visual atrocity. A little recap. Say thank you to those town workers who are making Freeport a safe and welcoming place for residents and visitors alike. As a governing board, slow down and consider the long-term impact of any significant changes to the permitting process as it applies to the development in our lovely New England village. Are we charging forward to something that we really want? Are we using the downtown vision plan as a guide to maintain the desired historic visual effect? And finally, the gateway influence. The gateway into Freeport for residents and visitors sets the stage for their view of the town as they proceed north. The successful McDonald's project was worth the effort at the Northern Gateway. Let's put forth the effort to make the Southern Gateway pleasing to the eye for residents and visitors alike for the next 40 years and beyond. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your thoughtful and well-crafted words. There's a lot of food for thought in there for sure. Councilor Bradley.
Yeah, this probably isn't the right time for a give and take on the points you've raised, many of which I agree with. But there are things to be said that are real and are concrete and are commitments and efforts that have been made that I think have to be merged with your thoughts. If we're going to come to a decision that's correct for the town, it's got to be done quickly, and it can't be done up here, I don't believe. McDonald's didn't happen up here. McDonald's happened in the community, an outcry of the community about something that was precious to them. There are a lot of people concerned about the issues that you raise, but they are not putting forward, as you have tonight, a concrete set of concerns and objections or political effort. And I think that needs to be done before the kinds of things you're talking about can have an impact on the 2-3 years of planning that have gone into the downtown, which these projects you're talking about are part of. And I'm just trying to be honest. I've been involved in all of it. I've talked to all the people that have views on both sides of this. We've been in coffee shops, and they raise the concerns and then they go away. And so it's not that I doubt that they feel strongly about it. It's just that I doubt that at this point they have developed a strategy or a way in which to see their values realized by people like those of us up here who are trying to do the right thing.
Thank you.
I don't know if that's helpful or not, but it's how I feel.
Well, I'm certainly rousting people about. And I know that you can't do anything officially in these seats as a council, but you definitely have influence. You definitely have influence.
As do you.
Yes. But, okay. We all have an influence, all townspeople, but they have to come forward and say something. Otherwise, we're going to have something that's very permanent, as opposed to experiment with some relaxation of the guidelines like you did this last summer, which I agree with. It's nice to be able to take a look at something and see if it works. But building a building, you can't take a look at that and see how it works. It's going to be there if the proposal goes through.
And for those in the public watching this tonight or in the future, the proposals before the project review board, it'll be before them a number of times. They've already gotten some of the approvals they need. They still have some more that they'll need to get. That board meets on, it's a Wednesday. I don't remember the exact date. I don't remember which agenda this particular project will be on, but it's definitely not done. So that's when the applicant will be before the board with all of the details and all the questions, and that's where they'll be talking at length and welcoming public comment as well. So that will be a good meeting for people to keep an eye on if they want to participate in the process. And you could also always send a letter to the town planner, and she'll hold it and forward it to everybody on the project review board if you have comments on that project. And of course, I'm always open to feedback from anybody.
Thanks.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah,
Appreciate
thank you. It's good to see you. All right.
Am I the last one?
Just on the Hedgehog Mountain, we do have that on the agenda, so that's coming up in 5 minutes, so.
I'll be here.
All right.
Yes, he's on the agenda.
He's on the agenda, yep,
Good.
briefly.
Okay. So you guys know who I am already?
Come up there and tell us, remind us, and everybody else.
Okay, so the name is Michael Marcola. I sent you all guys an email beforehand. Does that ring a bell?
Yep,
It's on the short-term rental?
sure does.
Good, okay. So first of all, I'm very impressed by you folks and the folks that have come here. I've had some exposure in the background in a small way in the public arena like this, but more so in trade associations and stuff like that. though, where you had to have people who worked together look for solutions in situations that worked and didn't work. So I have a lot of exposure to that. I've been out of that arena for quite some time, so to come back to this arena, it's impressive, I must say. My compliments to you folks and the folks that have been here. So that my purpose then this evening, from my understanding, part of the process here is just to bring this up and have it available, so to speak, as a public document so that you folks can determine how and when you want to bring it up as an agenda item to be addressed. So I'll try to make it brief. So greetings, council members. I'll start by restating my support for the STRRO ordinance providing definitions and means to assure compliance. My perspective, for the town of Freeport, short-term rentals are good. For adjacent residents, concerns addressed by compliance, and for rental homeowners, it's a means to offset the increasing real estate tax. Concurrently, I respectfully submit the 16-guest limit is not in the best interest of the town and is an unfair burden for some of the homeowners. Our property is one example. We're year-round residents, Freeport residents, at home 44 weeks. Then, during summer 8-week rentals, we do grandchildren care. We're told what we have to do, take care of our grandchildren. Much of our time is in our RV at Wolf Neck's Farm campground, and the kids are in the camp there. Our home at 101 Lower Flight Point Road has a private driveway onto 3.4 acres with adjacent space for parking and privacy. Summer rentals, starting in 2017, were mostly large family reunions, i.e. over 16 guests. Since 2021, with a 16-guest cap, we've had to decline various family reunions, leaving some weeks not filled with smaller groups. Beyond the negative financial impact on my family, Freeport's message on multiple rental websites, large family reunions are not welcomed in Freeport. As known, there are various views on the dynamics of the 16-guest cap becoming part of the ordinance. It can be said, with response to audience and compliance unknown, it was a reasonable starting backstop. But functionally, excessive noise or congested parking can be caused by smaller or larger groups, which asks the questions: have there been many complaints on noise or parking? How often has the compliance factor had to be used? Would there be a high negative and permanent impact by amending the 16-guest cap? And to put that into context, Freeport's current message on the World Wide Web: we're a 16-cap town. Need bigger? Go elsewhere. To the large homeowner, while taxes based on value, irrespective of size, your rental options are limited. I hope the above brings to the table to consider: remove the 16 cap or set procedures by which owners can apply for an adjustment. With summer 2023 guests already looking around, it's hoped this issue can be considered in pending meetings. To facilitate the process, I propose to read this letter into the record at the 20th of December meeting. Thank you very much, Michael Marcola. Are there any questions that I may answer at this time?
Mr. Daniele.
Do you mind, how many bedrooms do you have at your place? Like, how many people could you sleep at your place?
We're zoned for 20. Our year-round septic is zoned for 20 people. you're bringing up to the aspects which I elected not to bring in all to this. When you dig into the dynamics of how the structure in the ordinance is set up, there can be various interpretations. Because if one is set up for a year-round residence with a septic system for 20 people, what's the impact that you even have over a shorter period? And you really need to have you have to have the technical people really look into that.
So, as I listen, what you're asking for is sort of like the ordinance committee to go back to the moment when it passed this and said, we'll use this as a stalking horse and we'll see what comes out of it, and see whether there's a way to work into the current short-term rental ordinance an exception or something that an owner could apply for and qualify his property if Nick or somebody in the town were to say, you really have enough land to park, you've got enough rooms to take care of it, you got no neighbors, 16 is too small for you, you can go to 20, something like that.
Correct.
That seems a reasonable request to have, to refer to ordinance, given what we said when I remember the discussion, because there was, at the time, there was a representation I think we all made that, this was just the starting point, and we would get experience with it and see how it worked out. And, I don't know your property. I live down around there. You're in my district. But, I could certainly make a case for my property to be able to handle more than 16 people because of where it's located and the size of it and the number of bedrooms.
Same issue.
I don't want it, but I could see if I needed it or did want it, that I could make a fair argument for that if there was a process. Now, whether the town wants to engage in that exception process or not, I don't know. But ordinance would be a good place to start if this is a fair.
You're on the ordinance committee.
I'll take it on if I'm the. I don't think I'm the chair. I'm one of the ordinance committee meeting people. I'll take your letter to the ordinance committee and see if they want to take it up as an issue to consider doing. And that'll be a fair response to your request.
Yeah.
And it may lead nowhere. But at least it'll be a start for you, and I'll tell you when the meeting is, and you can come and make your points.
Because there are from some of the work that I worked at over the years, of looking at issues and resolving factors, there are 2 or 3 ways inside of this. And each route that you go down has strengths and weaknesses.
Okay, well, you'll come and tell us all about
That's right.
that.
So you have to really you put out the chart and you look at all the options and you come up with, because at the end of the day, in the bigger picture, that's not a nice message for the town of Freeport to be sending out.
And if it, well, anyway, I have my views.
That's a different part.
It's a start.
Councilor Daniele?
Does anybody remember, I can't remember from the ordinance, is it written that you can only sleep this many on the property, or they can only have this many on the property?
That's
You
the
can't
power.
advertise, I think.
No, it's more complicated. Right now, a doctor in the town, in the state of Freeport, wanted to retire. He wanted to have his family there, about 13 or 14 people. They were going to have an event for him, about 20, 25 people. This was his goodbye event. He was doing the whole thing. By the ordinance, you cannot have 25 rental guests on your property for dinner. The way that can be done, I could host them privately. And I could do it. I elected not to.
But the way the ordinance is written, in your understanding, is if you had been on the property, that could have gone through.
Say it again?
If you had been on the property, that could have gone through.
If I had done it privately, if I had not rented it,
Gathering your events.
I can have a private gathering of 25 or 30 people. I can have someone graduate from college.
I think this would be interesting to have in the ordinance committee and look through the portion of if the owner is on the property, that changes.
Well, let's just send it.
Regulate, like, if you want to have a big party, we can't regulate.
That's what I mean,
that.
but like,
Yeah.
so
That's
it's.
Yeah.
This is a bigger, and this is, listen, I'm impressed by what you guys have gone over here, and you've done, you guys are good, okay?
We know that.
I can tell from you over there, and you're so polite about it, and you to him too. But having said that, This is an operational type of stuff to go over.
Yep.
And I'm very, very welcome to be part of that team.
in town?
Excuse me?
Do you live in town?
I live here 52 weeks of the year.
Okay, so you're available for an ordinance?
Anytime. Yeah, I'm around. And he knows, listen, this is the only time that I can come in. He knows me so well over there. I have to tell him, I go like this, 1, 2, 3. He knows it's 1 minute, 2 minute, or 3 minute. And I can,
Almost as well as Mr. Stevens, so.
yeah, okay?
I think they were actually here together one time this week at the same time, trying to joust to see who got it first.
So, listen, I take no more of your time. I thank you all very much.
Yeah, thanks. We'll see you at an ordinance committee meeting.
Ordinance committee has something to do.
Yeah, better get busy. Anybody else on Zoom who wants to talk during public comment?
I think I recognize almost all the Zoom people.
They're here for other stuff?
Other events,
Okay.
including the next item, I think.
Okay.
That's up for discussion, or one of the next 2 or 3 items.
Okay, we got one other item and then hedgehogging. Our first action item of the evening is item 221-22, which is regarding our consent agenda, which I believe has 2 donations on it this evening. One to the Fire Rescue Department, one to the Heating Assistance Fund, which is quite sizable. Any reason to consider these separately as opposed to combined? Seeing none, Councilor Pillsbury, would you move our consent agenda?
Be it ordered that the December 20th, 2022 consent agenda be adopted.
Second.
Thank you, Councilor Daniele. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, 5-0, we have a consent agenda adopted. Item 222-22 is regarding setting a public hearing for Hedgehog Mountain. I can give a little bit of background on this. So tonight, we're setting a public hearing for January 17th. The Conservation Commission has been working most of the year to develop a new management plan, which they're required to do by ordinance. It's a little bit overdue. The ordinance says that they need to pass it by a 2/3 vote, which they did. They passed it unanimously just last week. Now it's required to come to us to adopt, but we are required to hold a public hearing before we can adopt it. So that's the public hearing we're setting on the 17th. The 17th is when I expect all the discussion, because I think there will be a considerable amount of discussion on this. There are details about the management plan that I think people are going to want to dig into, because it has impacts on what we can do with the property, including not only, but significantly, do we have mountain bike trails there and where can they go? So I know that there are people who have way more experience about the data that went into the management plan than I do, so I'm not going to try and represent it tonight. My goal for tonight is just to get the public hearing set, but having said that, if there is something that you want to mention before we go ahead and set the public hearing, you're welcome to do that now. I'd also encourage you to come back on the 17th for the official public hearing. But if there's anybody who wants to talk about that.
I'll talk about it, because my name's Tom Ross, and I live on Merch Road over by Peter, and I don't know how the town government works, because I can't figure it out through your website, and I can't figure it out through the forecaster. So I was told that there was a meeting about this management plan, and it's like, come down to town hall to check it out. So the information to figure out stuff around this town is not good. I've lived there for 35 years, and people probably know who I am through what I did a couple years back, but you got to get information out. And I respect Susan here, because when I found out about what I needed to find out about the town giving away town bonded property to a private company, there was one person down here, one, and that was me, one, who kept coming back and back until I finally figured out what was going on. And when the town figured out the townsfolk figured out what was going on, we filled the community center, filled it with people who were figured out what was going on. But I'm going to just say, I'm pleading the fifth here. I have no idea what's going on. But I did pull the town thing off the website. Fantastic piece of work. I came down here to support these people, saying they've done a great job. Fantastic job. And I'm sure this will come out in this public meeting, which I thought was tonight, and I'm sorry for taking up your time now. I apologize about this, but I think that now I'm speaking out of church here, because I talked to Peter the other day, is that, and I'm going to say, a friend of mine and I, we go out west, and you know, we go to Salt Lake Valley, and Salt Lake Valley's it's a concrete parking lot from Salt Lake, from Ogden to Provo, and there doesn't seem to be a vision of open space and land and this and that. And a friend of mine goes, you know, think about what's going to happen to this land, or what they could have done if they thought 100 years ahead. 100 years. We're all going to be dead. 100 years. So I look at, okay, 100 years from now, you guys, this town did a fantastic job spending a lot of money on a downtown vision plan. Downtown vision plan. Fantastic. I don't know what ARPA is, but you're talking about money. I'm like, and here's my vibe, and I don't know. But this town has a chance to think about 100 years ahead, and we're all dead, every one of us, sorry, but from the gateway of this town here to the western part of town. And what my vibe is that, and I think there's a great opportunity for a master plan. I agree that there should be snowmobiling out there. I think there should be mountain biking out there. I think, and maybe I'm wrong, I think there should be a paved path that folks could ride their bike on, or kids from my side of town. And I sent my kids to town in this school for a long time, and I put them on bikes to go to school because that's what they wanted to do. And I crossed my fingers they'd get across the highway alive. And I think there's a possibility to create a gateway out there for a paved path. So I'm in favor of it, but I'm also in favor of, I called it the West Freeport Outdoor Recreation Area, because there's about 6 properties of land. There's a Powell Road field where the football field is. There's the town landfill where our kids used to go sledding. There's the Hunter Road fields. There's the Keith property. There's the Hedgehog property. They all have different management plans. I know about it because I have every one of them. I was here 30 years ago when the town voted by, I think it was 2 or 3 votes to buy the Keith property. It passed by 3 votes. And then they came up with this plan because it passed by 3 votes in this town to bond that land. I'm in favor of it, but I'm also in favor of it when people come in and the mountain bike people, and I read something in disbelief when I saw it last year when I was out of town. It's like that the Freeport or NEMBA has been trying to create, or the town has been trying to create mountain bike paths out there for a long time. Well, now I'm going to say I've been out there for a long time, and Donna Larson, I don't get on the Conservation Commission because they come and go. I'm a resident. I've lived there 35 years. I know that property like the back of my hand. I go out there all the time. And I said, Donna, anoint me steward of the West Freeport Outdoor Recreation Area. I know about all the ordinance of every piece of land, and they're different. I know about it. So we can understand what's going on and get a master plan out there. I think that's the way to go. And you're going to have the mountain bike people come in. And I can tell you this, factually, I've been out there for 35 years. I had to bribe this town, bring high school kids into here saying, I'll build the senior project trail for free with money out of my wallet to do it. And I had to bribe this town to do it, and it was an act of God to get it approved, but they did it. They let me do it. And now I see that NEMBA wants to build this, or the town's been wanting to build mountain bike paths out there for a long time. It just doesn't pass the sniff test. I'm sorry. I've been out there a long time. I've been the steward out there a long time. I'm the only guy in this town who rides his mountain bike out there on the trails I should for a long time. I think it's great, but you need to make this 100-year vision when we're all gone. Let's think about what we can create out there as a master plan versus the toy of the day. And right now the toy of the day is NEMBA coming and saying, I'll build mountain bikes. I get it. I'm with you. But I also think you need a paved path. I think you need to understand the hiking trails. I read in this thing that I'm the guy who got rid of wood thrush because I built the senior project trail and they can't find wood thrush anymore. I didn't think that, but I guess I'm the guy. You read it, I've done it. And I can't figure out where I got rid of the habitat with the kids because I just built a trail down the hill and back up. but it's a jewel. It's the Central Park of Freeport. It is. It's the Central Park. And I'm sorry to take up your time. I guess I'm here on the wrong night. I'm not going to be here January 17th. So I appreciate sharing some of my thoughts with you. I think it's a great thing, but I think I'm asking, I don't know who is, but it needs a vision of what we can think about that property, the Central Park of Freeport, Maine, when we're all gone. That's all if anybody has any questions, have at it. But that's all I'm just giving my 2 cents for.
Thank you for
Thanks.
Just make a comment to Tom. We talked like last week, and this came in, I think, 2 days afterwards. So apologies from my end. We weren't sitting on this, just so you know, from when we talked.
I'm not that guy.
I would have thrown it at you if it was in my hands. I think we talked, and you're like, "When's that going to be done?" Oh, I don't know. They're working on it, and then I think I got an email 2 days later. Hey, it's done.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I mean, I haven't been down in this town for 7 years because I was so scarred from my last event down
I'm
here.
back.
I don't want to. But I will say this, I'll give you this, is that, and you say, Ed, you don't have authority to do stuff, but we elect you to represent us. And I don't come down here. You people are incredibly competent, and I thank you for your work you do. But, in my case, you say, well, we don't see people down here. Well, the soccer people could get 2,000 people down here in a day. And then you fill up the room and say, well, this is what they want. I was counting on you guys to represent me because I'm not 2,000 email of 2,000 kids in town. I'm not that guy because the demography isn't there. And we're asking you to balance out the things in town where, 2,000 people can come and say, this is what we want. We want soccer fields. These other people are NIMBYs. No, that wasn't the case. There was a balance of what we look forward to you guys to represent us for. And I would say, I marvel at your fortitude. I thank you for your time, and I appreciate what you do. But if you're looking at saying, and the town council there said, hey, I don't see your people in the chairs, that's a tough bar to hit. I'm just telling you, especially when you can't figure out what's going on in town. And I'm not trying to gripe. That's not it. But you go to the Freeport Conservation Commission website and you try and find agenda meetings on your website, you're not going to find them. They're not there. You can't find it. Or I can't. And I don't have the time to come down and go to different meetings and go to their meetings and this meetings and that. I rely on you folks, and you guys do a great job. I'm thanking you. But all I'm just saying is it might not be bad to have a vision for our Central Park. Thanks for your time.
Yeah. Thanks for comments. Thanks for coming down.
John, am I going to see you next Monday?
Monday night.
You coming?
No bribes involved, I assume?
See you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just wanted to tell you.
Counselor Daniele, would you care to read the be it ordered?
Be it ordered that a public hearing be set for January 17th, 2023 at the Town Council meeting that starts at 6 p.m. in Town Council Chambers, 30 Main Street, Freeport, for review and comment on Hedgehog Mountain Management Plan update as recommended by the Conservation Commission.
Thank you, Counselor. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Counselor Egan. Any other discussion on this?
Do we plan on taking a vote on that night?
We can. That's a possibility. It's not inconceivable. My own personal opinion is it's not inconceivable that there are questions raised that we might not have answers to that night, and we might want to do further research, and we might delay the vote. But yeah, it's possible that we could take a vote to accept it as is or with modifications, etc. Any other questions, discussion, Councilor Egan?
I'll just point out that we've had a fair amount of conversation with various groups, including the mountain bike trade group NIMBA, with a specific desired goal to build trails on Hedgehog Mountain, including the summit. And the management plan specifically says that the summit is ecologically too delicate for mountain bike trails. So that's likely to be some kind of an issue on the 17th. Just pointing that out in case you hadn't seen that.
And also, you'll notice it's 2 meetings out, which I think was done consciously so as to not jam it right around New Year's and to give,
Right.
let us notice it in the paper and give everybody more warning, so, because we're anticipating there's going to be a lot more interest in the subject, so. I think that was Dan's call, right, in terms of let's space it out a little further than just.
Yeah, I think everybody was on the
just
same page.
2 weeks
Nobody
and
wanted
jam
to
it in
feel
there,
like
so.
it was rushed through, yeah. But that's, I think John points out the real meat of the, what to focus on as you read through the plan.
Is there some place that I can go to see all of these properties that are described in a chart or a map or something? 'Cause I don't know where they all are.
On the Freeport website, there's a Freeport Outdoors page I think we still have, which talks about the
Keith
town.
property?
Keith property I think is now part of the Hedgehog Mountain property. It's been merged in, it's contiguous. So when you look at the Hedgehog Mountain map, it includes the Keith property. And that's in the management plan, you'll see the map. I think there's a Keith Trail.
This is all of them right here.
Yeah, so in the management plan, there's a map that shows some of it.
Page
Towards the
7, then page 8 is just page 8 and 9 if you look at these 2 maps. So this one is kind of a locust map that shows the entire town and actually several of our surrounding towns. And this is all of the properties in question. Hedgehog is this parcel, but you just heard Mr. Ross mention the Freeport Transfer Station, Pond Road Fields, Hunter Road Field. Everything except for the gray strips there are privately owned land. Everything else is part of the various town properties out on between Pownell Road and Hunter Road. Including the senior project trail, which is shown in blue.
Any other discussion? Chris, for the record, that was read or motioned by Councilor Daniele and seconded by Councilor Egan. So all in favor of setting the public hearing for the 17th? That's 5 of us. That's unanimous. Thank you, gentlemen. Next up, item 223-22, to consider action relative to the renewal of the Hilton Garden Inn using the park on Bow Street. You want to give us a review of how this works?
Really, yeah, on the fly. Let's see. We have an agreement with the Hilton Garden Inn. They hold events there. They pay us and rent the park when they hold events, but this is a formal agreement. They schedule, it gives them the right to essentially schedule and reserve the park. They pay for it. The public could do that as well. They would just have to come in and that question always comes up. Well, can I have an event there? Yep, if you come in and get a park usage agreement, get the council to approve it, you can take precedence as well. We require an agreement before we would kick anybody off a property. Otherwise, it's like an actual rental agreement for that specific day or those hours. Otherwise, it's first come, first serve. And if someone's playing Frisbee and you want to have your wedding right next to that, that's fine. You can do that. You just can't tell the Frisbee people or the guy playing the guitar to get off the park while you're doing your first come, first serve wedding in the park, unless you reserve it.
Councilor Egan?
We might need to articulate that because I got a firsthand experience of how it might be misinterpreted in that this summer we had a music concert in the park, which was reserved, and there was a concurrent wedding happening at the hotel, but the hotel never indicated that it needed anything in the park and therefore didn't reserve anything in the park. And then on the Saturday that it was happening, the police were called.
By the hotel?
By the hotel, by the wedding planner of the hotel operation. I'm not sure if they're on contract or an employee. We have a wedding here, you can't have this concert. And
you have the park usage agreement.
Yeah, so thankfully, our clerk had a piece of paper for us, and we pulled it out and said, we have this reserved. And they said, well, we do too. And we said, well, I don't think you have the park reserved. You have an event at your hotel. Anyway, so we just need to clarify that.
Okay.
So, so that it doesn't happen again. It got resolved in, about an hour.
Chris is writing as we speak. I'm sure her and I will follow up on it tomorrow. And there may need to be some communication line that's closed there. We can do that.
And
between.
it turned out to actually not really be a conflict. It was just people overreacting without all of the information. And once we actually got two human beings talking to each other, it was worked out in minutes. And there was, both events went off flawlessly. I'm assuming the wedding went off flawlessly. It looked like they were having fun. So.
Thank you for the heads up. We'll definitely follow up on that.
Councilor Bradley?
Yeah, to sort of follow up on what John says, there is a project on downtown revisioning that has a bandstand in that park, and I don't know how that the town or the group that would invest in that might be Meeting House Arts, it might be people in the community would be affected by a use agreement for the hotel. So as we go through thinking about investments in that, we ought to think about ways that we protect them from, what are, occasional uses by others, how that's coordinated and done.
Yeah, I think there'd be more demand. I know they haven't asked formally, but I know that the farmer's market might be looking for a different space because they might not be able to use the space they're in right now. And if they want to host that Friday mornings as they've done this year, one of the locations that I would think they might want to look at is Memorial Park. So we might not want to book anything for Friday mornings until we figure that out.
Yeah, or you might put something in the Hilton Garden lease that says, subject to, determinations by the town of town-sponsored or significant events that would conflict.
Chris, can you outline the reservation process they use, just so, we don't need to, if you want to step up to the mic, just so everyone's informed. I know that they contact you when they have events that book, right? And how do we learn about those and record those and pass that on to other people?
From the wedding coordinator at the Hilton.
Yep.
I think what happened with John's event was that those two calendars don't cross. That your group came and asked for use of town property for that, and then the calendar that holds for the weddings, those two calendars weren't linked, and that's why they got double booked on that Saturday. So we were already aware of that.
Okay.
Does she give you a list of dates at the beginning of the summer that she wants to hold?
As they're booked, she sends an email to me and we put it in, and then we notify Brent.
And if there's an event already
there's
scheduled
an
there, you
event.
say there's already something there that day that's not available.
Now the calendars are the same calendar, but at the time when that event happened, those two calendars weren't crossed.
Yeah, and that's fine.
Yeah.
I think we've corrected that, it sounds like, I hope. But if, let's just say, we were to say, hey, you can do the Friday mornings or, from 8 a.m. to noon in the park until 1 or whatever for a farmer's market, and we approve of that and they haven't booked anything yet, what would that look like? They would be calling you as things are booked and you'd say, oh, no, Friday mornings, remember, they're off the table? Would that be kind of how it goes, or?
It would be first come, first serve is how I understand it.
Correct, yeah. So, but you would tell them when they called for a reservation, that's not available during that day. Friday afternoon, Saturday is available, but not Friday morning.
What's to stop the inn from saying we want every Saturday all summer?
I mean,
First come, first served.
They have to pay for it.
They have to pay 3 days.
Yeah, they're
in advance
paying
of the event.
$200 for
I understand.
that rental,
But-
but they've never done that.
Not yet, but that is before we've had all this.
What's to stop you from
Demand
saying
for
that we
use of
want
the
a
park.
farmer's market 6 days a week there in January of each year?
Are we going to require the farmer's market to pay $200? I don't doubt it.
3 days in advance. They just have to cancel 3 days.
And you're not going to make Meeting House Arts pay $200 per use of a facility that they paid for. I don't know. I'm just saying it's.
No,
those are all-
generally for events, I think the best way I don't make that decision. That's actually the council's decision. But we propose, Chris and I kind of have a pretty standard, if it's a public event, free, if it's either a governmental use or a public event that's free and open to the public.
Correct.
There's a public benefit there. We don't propose something for a charge with you guys. If it is for a for-profit venue, if John wants to put his gates up for the next concert and, visual screening, and you can only get in to see the concert if you pay $10 at the gate, then I think that might be a different call with the council.
Depends where the money goes, right?
Yeah.
But my point's more to scheduling. So John or Meeting House Arts says we've got a venue here we want to count on for lining up programs. They won't know
There could be several different users that reserve that. It could be yoga in the park. Could be John could have his concert scheduled, and there could be a bandstand, and Meeting House might want to have a play on that.
I understand. Well, how do you resolve those conflicts in advance?
Policy, when you build things, and policy on what, we adopt a policy and what the
No, but
rental
you're about to
terms will
sign
be.
a lease, which is going
No, it's not a lease.
to, well, an agreement that would,
Yeah, there's still first come, first serve under this agreement, so.
I'd be careful
But,
about that.
but this, I don't see it being an issue this
It's never
summer,
been
because I
an
don't think we're
issue.
going to have bandstand built. We might start building it this summer, but I don't think it'll be, I think there'll be events this summer in
I
it.
don't think a bandstand has to be this huge, amazing new facade. It could be, I've seen bandstands set up on truck beds, and, whether we let it happen, I don't know, but all I'm doing is.
Well, it's not going to happen until July 2nd, even if you wheel it in on a truck bed, because we don't have money for it. So assuming that'll be part of the budget, right?
Most of the weddings are Saturdays and Sundays,
Saturdays.
mostly Saturdays. In the afternoons, mornings?
Yes, afternoons.
Mostly afternoons. And it looks like they can only book it for 4 hours at a time. So if we had a Saturday morning concert, that could fly or something, or Sunday concert.
I guess my only comment on this was, does the council want to consider having a cap on the number of days that the hotel, to go back to what was said earlier, what if they come in and say, well, we're expecting, due to COVID, everybody's now getting married outdoors, or whatever the dynamics are, we have a wedding from every Saturday from May 20th to August 10th. And they're willing to pay the $200 just to assume that they're going to have it. They're not doing that now, I understand that, but that could happen.
Do you have an average, just a guesstimate at the numbers that they do annually?
Before COVID, it was probably 7 or 8 a summer, and since COVID, it's been 1 or 2,
Yeah, right.
Including last summer?
including last summer.
Counselor Daniele?
So maybe we don't need it now.
I'd say, I think I'm willing to risk it for this summer with the eye of next year. Let's figure that out and kind of hammer it out.
Yeah. Maybe you can give it some thought for next year, I agree, yeah. See if there's a more.
And I continue to
be
book on
coming
a
down
first
on
come, first serve.
January 3rd to see Chris about reserving our concert dates for our outdoor
Right.
shows.
Do it right now. It's not a calendar year thing. Get on the next council agenda, yeah.
Those concerts you're doing every Saturday from now till December?
That's right,
yeah?
every
What
Saturday.
what is your group that does that?
We don't have a group. It's just me and Albright, but not.
All right.
that's cool.
So Counselor Bradley?
Yes.
Would you mind reading the beat order for item 223-22? Bow Street Park.
I don't want to do that one.
Okay. Counselor Egan, would you like to do that?
Be it ordered that the 2023 Bow Street Park usage agreement for and with the Hilton Garden Inn be approved. I thought that was called Memorial Park.
I thought so too.
It's
the park on
Is
Bow
it
Street.
officially?
It's both. It's
Okay.
both.
Just wouldn't want to get that confused if somebody has to get lawyered up about it
It's
later.
Memorial Park on Bow Street.
It does,
Yes.
yeah, the agreement says Memorial Park located on the corner
Bow
of Bow
Street.
and Park Street.
It goes by both names, I think. There is no other.
Second.
Thank you, Counselor Daniele. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Counselor Bradley, was that it?
Opposed.
Okay. Opposed?
Yep.
All right, so 4-1. Motion carries. Thank you. This is our last action item for tonight, item 224-22, regarding council committee assignments. We have 3 that we have to vote on. The others, 4 that we actually vote on. The others I appoint based on the feedback that I've gotten from almost all of you. Any discussion before we take this one up? No, Councilor Bradley, would you want to read this one?
Consider action relative to town council committee appointments to ordinance review municipal facilities and special projects. Be it ordered that the committee assignments as listed below be approved. Municipal facilities, Councilors Fournier, Egan, and Pillsbury. Appointments, Councilors Egan, Bradley, and Lawrence. Special projects, Councilor Bradley, Lawrence, and Daniele.
One more.
Oh, sorry. Ordinance, Councilors Pilch, Bradley, and Pillsbury.
Second.
Thank you, Councilor Daniele. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, gentlemen. That's all our action items, but we do have one other significant other business item, and then we have some executive session stuff too. So for other business, we have a discussion around participation in Project Home with Freeport Community Services and Quality Housing Coalition. which I think our manager's going to introduce, but I've got some people on Zoom also to talk about it. I know Councilor Egan's been involved as well.
Yeah, we've got, so I'll do a really bad job of introducing this, I'm sure. Hi, Victoria. We've got you up on the screen here. And I think Sarah might be coming over as well. Hi, Sarah. We've got you both on the screen here with us. So, all right. So this is, I would say, rapidly developing because I think Wednesday or Tuesday or Wednesday was when I learned about this, and we learned the details on Thursday of last week of what this program could potentially look like. So Victoria, who's up on the screen, is Executive Director, correct, Victoria, of Quality Housing Coalition QHC, and they do Project Home, which is what we're discussing here in this under this item. So the QHC had submitted a grant application to Cumberland County under the CDBG program, Community Development Block Grant Program, and actually had invited Freeport, after kind of hearing some of the housing and rehousing and settlement issues that we're going through, invited us to participate along with the city of Westbrook in that project, was kind of how this was initially brought to our attention. Project Home is a project, and I'll let you give the correct details on this, Victoria. I'll just introduce it. It's a project where their organization works directly with landlords, maybe pre-qualify isn't the correct term, but to work with them to identify housing areas, apartments, landlords that are willing to work with people who would generally fall into the category of people who are in our GA program, whether that's through the New Mainers Group or people coming off the ERA program that don't have housing, that are looking for permanent housing, people in shelters, people in hotels that are essentially legally shelters in the state of Maine. So they work with landlords ahead of time. They identify families, and they're able to place them kind of, they do the housing navigation and the housing coordination feature. And if you remember, we talked with Freeport Community Services recently, and that was one of the things that they don't do, and that Sarah and Mike didn't feel that they had the capacity to do in the kind of intermediate term, to bring somebody on board to do that job as part of the GA role. So this kind of had some appeal to us because this is one of the missing pieces, the missing link, if you will, between what we do for GA, what we do for housing, and just the landlord general market. Like, how do we make those connections? So part of what they work on, and I'll let Victoria speak to this in 30 seconds, part of what they work on is finding what those shortfalls might be that landlords need, what they need, and negotiating with them and putting people in those places and making up the difference. So do you want to explain what that entails, Victoria, maybe? Just give an overview of what Project Home is. We do have your two-pager here that the council's looking at, just the Project Home 101 that we handed out to them that you sent over last week.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And it's really great to be here with all of you. Just quickly, I'll give a brief sort of update on how QHC was formed. Our founding board members are Dana Totman, the former CEO of Avesta, Jonathan Cully, owner and principal at Redfern Properties, Tom Watson, owner of Port Properties, and Britt Vitalius of Southern Maine Landlords Association and Vitalius Realty. And this was back in 2018 when, as you all know, we were in a housing crisis then, a housing shortage crisis. And these nonprofit and for-profit landlords came together to say, what are we going to do to open up housing opportunities in our existing units, recognizing we have many barriers to getting into housing. And so that's sort of how Project Home began. And we started out with 20 units in just the Portland area. Now we have 200 units that we are overseeing with 32 landlord partners in 5 different counties. And what we do, exactly what the manager said, is we work specifically to bring landlords on board to remove some of their barriers to applying for housing, to support them with financial guarantees and payments of damages if necessary, if they will agree to accept folks with subsidy, particularly general assistance, but we work with every subsidy here in Maine, including Section 8, and accept our tenants. And each one of our tenants, we provide housing navigation services and housing stabilization throughout the entire tenancy. And so through the 200 units that we have, 99% of our folks are successful because we're there really to navigate all the systems that they're working in and to ensure that there's a positive and strong landlord-tenant relationship for those folks as they move through that year. We've found great success with our landlords, and we do a lot of work up front. And so we're really happy to be talking to you all about, what we could do to help out in Freeport.
So part of this conversation started with, hey, there's this grant application that's in that we did decide, well, at least in the pre-application phase, right, to go along with. The actual application happens in January, but we said, yep, to Westbrook, we'd like to glom onto your work, if you will, so we can participate in that. But we started having conversations about our immediate housing needs, which, as we're all aware, there are families, whether that's 10 or 80, it's some number in between there, that are going to be homeless, not by choice, possibly evicted from some of the emergency rental places where they're living, mostly hotels, but there are some other, apartment and house rentals that are happening that also face the potential for eviction as ERA winds down. And we discussed the time in between, if this grant application is successful, if they are able to establish these services kind of semi-permanently, including Freeport, that would be great, but we have an immediate need. So we started talking about other people started talking about the short term and pitched an idea to Sarah and I, like, hey, this is a group that could help us in the immediate short term. I know we've got Amy Cartmel and Rep. Sachs, who are on the call as well in Zoom, and they were both involved, along with a couple other community members, in kind of putting these people, all of us together and saying, hey, there's a group that maybe could serve that intermediate need in Freeport. So this is all great. They can all help. Why is this in front of the council? Because there obviously is a funding component attached to this. The two parts of that, and I should have asked for $75,000. Sarah and I were going back and forth what the correct amount was. If I knew I just had to get Bob here, or I would have got 75 as a motion today, I would have done that. Sarah and I were going back and forth on what those amounts. I think we're pretty confident that the $20,000 housing navigator number that Victoria put forward, which would be a 20-hour, roughly, I know this isn't a commitment, but roughly 20 hours a week for 6 months. That's the number that Victoria put forward to us, to have somebody working specifically on Freeport and on finding people housing for that interim period until 6 months, or if the grant is successful, moving forward, then that would be, is that a year funding or longer than that? That's in that potential grant application that's coming forward, Victoria. Is it about a year?
Yes.
Okay. So the other half of it is the kind of funding that they do for the, I'll call it, it's not, I apologize for using this word, it's the best I can come up with, gap kind of funding. So that's everything from security, like Victoria said, security first month, last month. Some of it is gap, but it's not all gap funding. The difference between like subsidy programs and the landlord incentives, whatever it would take to get somebody to agree to have that family stay there permanently, to address concerns that the landlords might otherwise not take a rental tenant in because they don't have the means to pay all kinds of costs. So, so that amount is, I think you estimated between $2,000 and $4,000 per family. So you can do the math and we can come up with the number. I threw out the number 20,000 for suggestion, but I probably should have said 75,000. All right, I'm about to get slapped here. You can't see off screen. You can do the math. It would be, 10 to 2 to 4,000 would be 5 to 10 families with 20,000, double that, it would be 10 to 20 families. We probably have, between 10 and 40 families, depending on how this all shakes out in the next couple months, that Victoria's organization could be helpful with. So if the council wishes to participate, that's kind of what we're looking at. There's not really a right number for that second half. What Sarah and I did suggest is, if we want to move forward with this in an immediate amount and a smaller amount to start the program, because I think that they feel that we could be finding housing for people pretty quickly here, like starting this week, next week, maybe something like that. And then maybe understanding that number may very well increase if they're successful, and kind of committing to, if there is a long-term success there, that we might consider more funding for that. So I know there's like a million questions from talking with individual counselors, so why don't you
shoot.
Councilor Regan, you want to start? I know you've been involved.
Yeah, what's the, we had allocated some support for FCS and then held some back. What was the amount that we held back? It was more than 20, wasn't it?
75 or 80?
Yeah, I
It was
don't.
80,000.
80,000, yeah.
Okay.
That's what you encouraged FCS if they had future need
Yeah.
for that money to come back. So, yep.
And so we're just letting out a little bit here to give this a shot. I mean, I guess
Yeah, if
might be inclined to consider a little bit more, given how critical and acutely sharp the issue is. And we're not, in my opinion, we're not taking a lot of risk here because Quality Housing Coalition has a proven track record of how successful this program is. And this is a wheel that's already turning, and we're just putting a small amount in to actually amplify the effort that is already quite successful. The network that they have developed with landlords is the critical piece to this, because that builds trust and confidence with those landlords talking to each other and saying, oh yeah, I've got this group that comes in and is supporting my tenants. I have way less problems with those tenants.
Right.
So that's we don't have enough money in the world to buy that. That's already happening. So we have an opportunity here, I think, to actually amplify the success. Yeah, I mean, if the request is 20, I'm absolutely down for that. Let's go.
The request, we should break it up into two halves, right? The request that would go to QHC for the staffing for a 6-month period would be $20,000
Right.
is the rough estimate right now.
Is that a request to us for 20 as well?
Yes.
Okay.
So the remainder would be, Sarah and I thought about what this would look like, would likely be some chunk of money that's earmarked, set aside by the town for people that QHC finds for housing. They probably in FA and
20 plus 20.
For specific needs.
20
Got
or
it.
40, 20 to 40
Okay,
to
never mind.
60,
Right.
depending
All right.
on
So I
how.
understand that. I wanted to
whether
make
we want
sure
to do it
we
all
were-
up front or whether we want to do a little bit at a time.
I wanted to make sure we were going to provide the program with a ramp to success and not sort of let something out and then have it fall flat and say, well, we shouldn't have done that. So, great. I'm strongly in favor.
Councilor Bradley?
Yeah, I just trying to understand. My understanding was that FCS has not yet identified anything for that $80,000 that we set aside from ARPA. My question is the 427 include that 80?
Yes, that's
or is it
what 80 are we talking about? So the money this includes the 112 or 115, Sarah, 112?
Yeah, it was right around 112, and I think it was about 88 that was allocated or kind of set aside.
No,
to come back to.
that's not included in the 425.
But it is money that we said we would revisit if FCS could identify a need. Here's the need. Why don't we just say,
let's do it.
Let's do it with that number, and you use your judgments about the gap.
Love it.
Well, don't trust me for that, but I'm telling you, it would be 20,000 for.
I get it.
Approximately 20,000 for this, and then
you got
some other amount for the housing.
You got up to 60 from the rest of that money to do the gap funding.
Fantastic.
If you find that number of people that need gap. And now my question is, are those landlords in Freeport, or are they all over the place?
They're all over, but
In other words,
Victoria, do you want to describe who?
My
the
question is,
geographic-
we have people in our hotels, and some of them have connections to this town because of the long-term rental relationship, and they have kids in the schools. Is there any effort to place them in units that want to be placed in Freeport?
Yes, and in conversations with some of your realtors who I think are on the call here, Amy Cartmel and Leanne Barshoff, we hope to be able to find Freeport landlords who would be willing to work with the program. That would be ideal if the families really want to stay here. Obviously, the kids are in the schools. We want to keep that continuity. That is a mission of ours with every family we place that has children. If we can't find places here in Freeport, we always look elsewhere. We are in 5 counties, and we'll use our extensive network as well as build on it with this support to bring more landlords into partnership with Project Home.
So the answer I'm looking for is not now, but you'll be looking for Freeport people to meet the needs of Freeport renters.
Yeah, and I think there's a group of Freeport people that are already working on that. I see Amy on the call. Amy, if you have any specific feedback you want to provide on that, just raise your hand and I'll
I'll turn your mic on, but as long as I'm not misquoting you, I think that group, Freeport Housing Trust, some of their board people, Amy, Leanne, a few of them have been working, and that's kind of, this group kind of came together, that working group, plus Melanie, plus Sarah, plus the
Nice
town.
job, Melanie.
Yep.
Counselor Daniele, did you have something to add?
I just wanted to know if we could fund the navigator position for 3 months rather than the full 6 months. Let's see how it's going. I'm also assuming that the amount that we need is going to be greater in the beginning, and then it'll probably trail off as people get placed and whatnot. So is that a possibility?
Can I actually ask a follow-up question? Actually, Victoria, can I ask a follow-up question to that might help inform the decision?
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about how many families the coordinator would be realistically able to set up with housing, what your sort of success rate is, and kind of what the timing of starting? I mean, is this coordinator going to be ready to go in 2 weeks, in 3 weeks, and then what sort of success rate do you see as we progress?
Yeah, great. We actually will be devoting a number of our team, probably 4 of us, and we have a plan to come up on Friday, if all works out, to really work fast. As you know, the funding, although good news, funding for the hotels will continue into the end of January. That really gives all of us who are working really hard to house folks in these situations a little bit more time, which is fantastic. Hopefully the legislature takes up an important bill tomorrow and we can see what happens there. But we work anywhere between 3 and 8 households that we house each month. But if we have a dedicated coordinator who's working with individual families, and just so you all know, we are multilingual. Our staff speaks Lingala, Portuguese, French, and Spanish fluently. So we don't have any need for interpreters for the most part. We don't have anyone on staff speaking Arabic, so we'll have to see who you have. The good news is that the folks who are at the hotel are also very connected to our partners at Hope Acts because they're all seeking their work permits. And so we work very closely with Hope Acts on those initiatives because being able to work and being able to have sustainable housing in our minds really creates that housing stability. And so, we will be able to work very quickly as a team, even though, the funding would be for one person. We really want to devote our team as much as we can, as quickly as we can, because we know the timing of this is tricky.
Crucial.
And also, I just want to recognize Amy and Melanie have come into the chat. So if you have any questions for Amy Cartmel or Rep. Sachs, they're on the call now.
Got it. Do they have their hand up to speak or just to be available?
Our state rep does. Hi, Melanie. How you doing? Go ahead.
Hi there. With permission, Mr. Chair, I'd like to address the council, if I could, to one of the questions that was asked. Is that okay?
Yes, please do.
Thank you so much. Hello, everybody. It's so nice to see you. And I would emphatically say that I would highly recommend funding the Navigator for the 6 months. And the reason being, this is not only a short-term solution, it's also potentially long-term because, as we know, this housing crisis is not going to be 6 months long. And the fact that you all, in your hopeful generosity and good thinking, will fund this Navigator position so that if this CDBG application comes through, that funding won't be available until July, even if it's approved in March, so that this Navigator position would go from January, hopefully till July, and then start July 1 and continue. That Navigator position can help continue to build the network of landlords, which so many community members are working on right now. So Victoria's team is already scheduled to come to Freeport with your approval to start working with families. Lots of us are working around the network for landlords for the short term, but this is going to be a long-term problem. And having that investment right now, hitting the ground running with an experienced partner. And I came before you 2 weeks ago, and this is what you asked of us. We need short-term solutions and long-term stabilization. This is what you asked for. You also asked for a housing navigator, and you asked for a way to help families of any kind who are here in Freeport suffering from housing instability. This is that missing link that you asked for. So hopefully we can answer your questions tonight to show this amazing program and how it partners so well with the wonderful work that Freeport Community Services does.
Hey, Melanie, while you got the floor, can I ask, what's the update on the bills that are pending at the state level? Sounds like there's one tomorrow and maybe one in January.
Right. Right now, there is a public hearing tomorrow on my Facebook page. If anybody on this call wants to testify either live or in person on room 228 at the State House tomorrow, or by Zoom, or just submit your written testimony, go to my Facebook page or email me, melanie.sachs@legislature.maine.gov, and I'll send it right to you. So that is around the original package. Nothing has really changed. So there are a couple of administrative things from the first package that was considered just a few days ago. So that is the emergency heat. Within that, there is substantial housing relief money, $22 million currently in there, along with lots of heating assistance, which we can certainly talk about if you wish. Additionally, as Victoria said, former Representative Morales said, the ERA money has been extended through January, and that was from a different pot that's been clawed back. And I talked just this morning or yesterday morning with Greg Payne, who is the governor's housing liaison, because if some of that money is released, I would like that to also come, some of it to come to Freeport to help supplement these efforts. Again, as Councilor Egan said, there's no amount of money that's going to fix this problem, but we can certainly put it to its best and most targeted use.
Thank you. That's helpful.
You're welcome.
Does Amy have her hand up as well?
Yep. Amy Cartmel. Hey, go ahead, Amy.
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to echo what Melanie just said in terms of the fact that to agree that a 6-month term for the housing navigator is really essential. And the reason is that there's such an extreme shortage of rental housing right now. It'll take that long and longer to find housing for as many folks as possible. A lot of people know me as being on the Freeport Housing Trust Board. I'm actually not here in that capacity, but I do know that all 183 affordable housing units that we have in Freeport are currently full. That's it.
Thank you, Amy. And thanks for all the work that you're doing, as well as the others that have been mentioned, Melanie, Leanne, and everybody else. I know you guys have been very busy and have rehoused a number of families already, so I appreciate that. I guess I have two questions, see if I can remember them both. One is, maybe this is a question for Sarah, though I'm sure anybody can answer it. We were told a month or two ago that there were 80 families that were in temporary shelters of some sort in Freeport, different backgrounds and different shelters. Can you give us an update on what that population looks like? How many have been rehoused? How many are affected by this expiration of the ERA at the end of January?
Yeah, so we have been able to house a couple of families at the Best Western. We were looking at around 80 that were affected by the ERA ending. Not all of them are in hotels. So there are some people who are housed in apartments throughout the community. But I know Mike, as well as the amazing work of the team on the call tonight, they have been successful in housing a couple, but we still have a really long way to go. So I don't have the most up-to-date numbers as of today. I'm technically on vacation, so I didn't talk to Mike today. But I think we're right around 25 right now at Best Western, and probably about the same if we're looking at the other hotels combined within the community. I also wanted to just touch on this resource as well for the families that are at Casco Bay Inn. I think that although I think of them as being safe because they are receiving general assistance from the city of Portland, Peter and I always talk about when is the rug going to be pulled out from under us. We don't know. They've certainly exceeded any sort of state regulation within the program as to how long they need to support these families. So I think that these efforts as well can be directed towards that. And it's certainly a wish that I've had for a very long time working at Freeport Community Services. It is, as Melanie said, And I mean, you said it so perfectly. It is absolutely the missing link. And I think that, just looking beyond the hotels, beyond the urgent need that we're feeling right now, this is going to be an incredible resource, hopefully long-term for the community. And we'll see just a variety of folks benefiting from it.
Thanks, Sarah. And I remember my second question, which was just the piecemeal approach. So I'm supportive of this, and I'm looking forward to getting it done. But I also have a concern that Freeport's doing something. We're doing it with Westbrook and some others. If other towns are choosing not to do it or just haven't gotten around to it yet, does that create a bit of a magnet for anybody in southern Maine to say, hey, you've got a housing issue? Oh, go to Freeport, go to Westbrook, because those towns have kind of ponied up and had these programs in place. It'd be much better if it was a regional approach, since it's a regional problem. Having said that, I don't want to wait and sit around and do nothing, but I would very much like to see us on a path to say, how are we attacking this cohesively rather than draining Freeport or Westbrook or Portland or anybody else? And I'm not sure who that's to, but I suppose Melanie might be in the best position to answer that.
Well, and I actually might even ask Victoria, but what I would say in the short term is those families are here. We have 80 families right now that need assistance. And this is a very specific, we're not building emergency shelter, right? Like that can't happen here in Freeport. We are working on with the beautiful housing committee that you all just set up. Thank you very much, to think about long-term, because long-term, what really is going to help is having more housing, right? So that we can have people move to either a home, from an apartment to a home, or things like that. So thoughtfully, as we heard earlier, thoughtfully having that develop and plan full in a way that you'd like, that's fantastic. This is, again, a very specific program for a very interim. And not every family is going to be accepted into the project home. There's other specialty housing for lots of different folks. This is one solution that we can hopefully do. And so, Victoria, I know you're working with so many other communities as well. As you talked about, you're in 5 different counties. So you are the magnet, Representative Morales.
Well, but I think thank you. I don't know about that, but I think it's a great point. We do need more coordination, region-wide, statewide, and I think it's something that has to be talked about in each municipality, that it really shouldn't be on every town and city to figure housing insecurity out and homelessness. So I think it's an excellent point. I mean, our first step at trying to make this a little more regional was to go after that multi-community CDBG opportunity. So hopefully, I don't think anyone's ever done that before with something like this. So we'll see. Hopefully it's successful. But I will say that, the city of Portland has funded housing navigation. Maine Housing has funded housing navigation. South Portland has funded housing navigation. So it's not new necessarily. They continue to fund it, I think, because they're seeing that it's working. United Way funds it, and various other ways. But I think your point is very well taken. That it does need to be regionalized in a big way.
I think, Dan, to address those concerns, I've kind of gone back and forth. Sarah and I talked about this, and I've gone back and forth. In my mind, certainly, do we earmark some of this funding that you guys might act tonight, or you might act shortly, to set aside for people that are here right now, that are ERA facing, the end of the ERA program, potentially homeless because of that cause. But at the same time, what if a miracle happens? All those 50 to 80 families are housed and individuals are housed, and we've got money and a housing navigator left over. I'd hate not to say like, oh, you're homeless now, not as a result of that. We don't want to help you. But I think we need to either consciously, through some kind of condition or something like that, set that the money that we're talking about now is targeted and focused on the immediate crisis, which is the families that will potentially be homeless at the end of January. At the same time, I don't know if you want to make that formal to the extent that it will exclude other people. I don't really know. It's just kind of out there for discussion is why I'm bringing it up.
Yeah, no, I'm comfortable that this would be well spent. We've got enough families in town that have a need today currently, so I'm not concerned about that. I was more of a long-term, I don't want to be
I agree.
The only town trying to solve this problem. I know we're not.
Well, I think Sarah and I have that concern, right, Sarah? That are we backfilling?
Our main concern is that if ERA or an ERA, analog or substitute happens, like gets extended for some way for 6 months or a year, do all of a sudden, some of the situation, we don't really want to evict people from the hotels. Let's bring some more groups in because it's the winter and we can charge X $100 a night for rooms. I mean, I think that's a concern, and I know that FCS has that concern. They don't want to be doing wave number 2 or wave number 3. I mean, it was really the shelter by hotel for the overflow is the emergency option. We don't want it to become the de facto answer to homelessness.
Right. Yep.
In Maine, it's not the right answer, as all the other towns and cities around us have learned. For so many reasons, there's not the services available. It's not the right type of facility. There's overcrowding. I mean, it's great to keep people from freezing in the wintertime, but it's not the answer to homelessness. So
is this going to make a dent in the public safety issue that we have with a population of folks in some of the hotels in Route 1 that have seen an increased need for public safety services?
I'll be cautious.
Or is it a different population?
Well,
That's
about
probably gonna
answering
benefit from this
answering that directly, I'd be cautious, but I think that probably a lot of the issues that we're having are caused by the tenants and the kind of long-term population that Victoria's group may not be able to find housing for.
Got
right? We talked about this in a conversation last week. Who they focus on. They focus on all groups of people. This isn't a refugee asylum seeker targeted program. It's not a long-term Maine resident targeted program, but it is targeted, and they do end up having to be working with people that are successful at keeping housing. So the chronic homelessness, I hesitate to use the phrase homeless by choice, but the long-term persistent homelessness because of mental health and things like that, those aren't people that necessarily are able to get into a stable housing program. That's why they're in the shelter to begin with. So I'm not speaking out of line there, right, Victoria? That's generally not a group that you can set up for long-term success, even with your organization.
Absolutely. No, you said it perfectly.
Okay. So we still have that to address at some point as well, or try and.
But hopefully 20 to
with
30 to 40 fewer potentially homeless families in 2 months.
Right.
Yeah.
And hopefully a new social services coordinator coming on to our police department soon.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Does Amy, do you have your hand up again?
Oh, she
That's
said
a
no.
residual hand? Okay.
I'll get it down. Hold on.
Anybody else have questions, comments? So it's the ask is for 20,000 for quality housing, and then another 20,000 for, according
40.
to the memo, for
Or 40 or 60 or 80.
for FCS to use to fulfill the gap funding at FCS's discretion, working with QHC. Is that?
And to be clear, we think 20,000 is the immediate need, but the long-term need will be more than that. So we should,
over the next 6 months.
yeah, we should not expect that it would just be 20,000. I'm thinking that's more along the 40 range, long-term. I think we really need to kind of see some results in what the individual costs per family unit are before we know what that long-term need is. If it's held by the town, there's not really any concern about what that amount is, because you can quickly act to change that as long as there's recognition by the council that Sarah and I will probably come back and say, hey, it could be, 2 weeks from now, we could say, hey, that fund's mostly spoken for. Can we appropriate some more money into it? I don't want there to be surprise in the council if that's what we do.
And Sarah, would you object if this pot of money came out of the 80,000 additional that we had kind of earmarked for FCS?
I would not object at all.
Okay. The reason I ask is to get over my earlier concern about trying to rush things through and do things without sufficient public notice, but since we already allocated 80,000 that we said we would give to FCS for this kind of thing, directly for this kind of thing, I'm comfortable saying that we had a good spirited discussion about it, and we said, yeah, this funding's available, so it's not a surprise that we're springing it on tonight.
I do think this is a potential, it's not currently an emergency, but there's the potential within the next couple months for it to become a public emergency.
Throw something out. We have up to 80. 20 for quality housing.
I move.
The balance to be held.
I'd make a motion that we approve 20,000 for the program as defined by Quality Housing Coalition, and that we release half of the 80 that we had held back for future needs at FCS of previous approvals. So that would be 20 for QHC and 40 for the gap needs at FCS, placing these folks.
So 60 of the 80, just to be clear.
Yeah.
60 of the 88.
And is the intent that that 60 be taken from the 80 that we had set aside for FCS as a discretionary amount of ARPA?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Second.
Thank you, Councilor Bradley. What do you guys think? Any discussion? Preston, we had a lot of discussion already, so. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
That's everybody. Unanimous. Thank you, gentlemen, and thank you mostly to the people on the call who are
Yeah,
doing
thanks
all
very
the hard
much.
work.
Great presentation, Victoria. Thank you.
Yeah.
You know, this issue has gone from desperation to solution in a period of 2 or 3 weeks, and I just couldn't be more proud of everybody in town and everybody on the call and everybody who stayed with it and found the solution. It's quite a relief.
Yeah. Yeah. We're very fortunate.
Well, Melanie was the one who dragged me kicking and screaming into the call and dragged Sarah kicking and screaming into the call and put us all together and said, you will be there in 2 days and you're going to learn about this program. And thank you. Representative Steph.
I keep saying I live in the best town ever. I can just all I want, but without the collaboration of all of these amazing people, including those up on the dais here in the council, but these amazing community members, many who I know are watching also, ready to act. So Ed, you had said, what can the community do? They can support Freeport Community Services. They can support Quality Housing Coalition, who will be there on Friday. We can thank folks like Amy's husband, Matt, at the Rotary for putting together Christmas Eve dinner. I mean, this community is amazing. So thank you for being such a caring community. And when I politely ask if you'll come to a call, you actually do. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you to everybody who made this happen. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
All right, guys, thank you. All right, we've got, we're on to executive
That's the end
sessions,
of our regular
plural.
agenda. We do have executive sessions.
I'll leave it until.
Okay, that's coming up.
I hope to be working with some of you in the future. We haven't done this a long time before. I just sit back and just watch how it operates. Very much, thank you very much.
Thanks, Michael.
Let you guys get on to your executive session as soon as you get it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Nice having an audience, keeping us honest.
Oh, now there we go. How sweet.
All right, Councilor Egan.
I make a motion that the town council enter executive session.
Second.
For which reasons?
Sorry, I didn't know I had to do that. To consider action relative to an executive session pursuant to 1 MRSA, Section 405, 6C pertaining to a real estate matter, and 1 MRSA, Section 405, 6D pertaining to a discussion of labor contracts between the Town of Freeport and the Freeport Police Benevolent Association.
I assume your second still stands. Yeah. Councilor Pillsbury?
Aye.
Councilor Daniele?
Yes.
Councilor Bradley?
Yes.
Councilor Egan?
Yes.
And chair votes yes. We are in executive session.
Let's give a minute to kill the feeds and take a break.
We need to read those citations, right?
Yeah.